What's happening? The current situation through the eyes of the prophet Zachariah of the Old Testament. For several days now, I've been thinking, says the writer, about my post from about 2 years ago entitled, How 4 Workers Shall Break the Horns of the Nations, and I decided I needed to share it. Few noticed at the time, whatever the name was, the subtle name, whether it was too early. But if you finally have questions about what's happening and what will happen soon, what to prepare for, and what not to be afraid of, then you just have to read this article. Better late than never, as they say, and it's not like the open seminar has run out and has nothing more to say. There is something, if only a lot. But it's hard for me to talk better about what's happening today and what I need to be prepared for tomorrow than I already did 2 years ago. After all, the form, which was once broken, has withstood the test of time, and from a broken biannual, they give 2 unbroken current ones. So further until the end of the post, just a reprint of the article without the introduction for the sake of brevity. I don't change either the letters or the images. Now, I remember he says, the chariots with workers from the prophet Zachariah, and there too the truck workers go to do an important thing, to tear off the horns of the peoples. Zechariah 1:18-21. And I lifted up my eyes and saw, behold, 4 horns. And I said to the angels who talked with me, What are these? He answered me, These are the horns that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Then the Lord showed me 4 workers and said, What will they do? He said to me thus, These horns scattered Judah, so that no one could lift up his head, but they came to terrify them, to break down the horns of the nations, who lifted up their horn against the land of Judah to scatter it. For several days now, I have been thinking about my post from about 2 years ago entitled, How 4 Workers Will Break the Horns of the Nations, and I decided I needed to share it. I don't avoid the words Judas and Jew. Remember the words of the Apostle Paul, who explains to us the true Jew, what the true Jew is. Romans 2:28. For he is not a Jew who is outwardly, neither is circumcised done outwardly in the flesh, but he is a Jew who is inwardly, and the circumcision which is in his heart is in the spirit and not in the letter. And thus, reading this prophecy as a prophecy, we must admit that until at the end of time, and Zechariah the prophet writes about it, about the day of the Lord, the day of judgment, we Christians are alive not by appearance, not by circumcision, the name of this, not in the letter of the Spirit, have already devoured peoples with their horns. Look at Russia, where atheism has been dormant for 100 years. Weren't we the Christian Barry Pontes in 1917? And they have not screwed them since then. It's a good thing it's not led like it was back then, but the workers had already left. Babylon is kaput. For several days now, I've been thinking about my post from about 2 years ago until how 4 workers shall break the horns of the nations, and I decided to share it. Now, the horns in the Bible, in the prophecies, are the powers of the nations, their policies and armies, the people who knew how to be and also how to conquer. The fact that Israel, the northern kingdom, lost 11 tribes, and later Jerusalem, southern kingdom, Judah, attacked, were filled from the 4 horns, represent that from the north and from the south and from the south and from the west and from the east, the neighboring nations attacked the people of God. The Lord permitted it. For example, when Samaria fell from the invasion of the king of the north, as the prophets foretold, then followed Assyria, Egypt, attacked the half-ruined country from the south, the Philistines from the west, and the Persians from the east, and these 4 horns from the 4 corners of the earth horned God's people and are still going. For several days now, I have been thinking about my post from about 2 years ago. The 4 workers shall break the horns of the nations, and I decided to share it. Why is this important today? Let me remind you, especially my new readers, that all these things have happened to them as examples, but they're written for our instruction, to whom we have reached the last ages, 1 Corinthians 10:11. So therefore, for us, the Christians, for the new Israel, especially for Russia as a prophet, Ephraim as kings from the rising of the sun, Revelation 16:12, all this is of utmost importance. For here in Zechariah, we see the situation on the eve of the appointing of the white king and the beginning of his blessed reign. Zechariah tasks, like our tasks today, was and is to help people take their steps to lead people out of Babylon. And this is very difficult because entire generations have already been born and raised in godless Babylon, and more recently, as in the days of Zechariah, although they gave people freedom of belief, as if they could really be taken away, all this dissolves in the Babylonian thought, lifestyle, and religious formalism, along with paganism. For several days now, I've been thinking about my post from 2 years ago, the 4 workers shall break the horns, but now Zechariah sees certain 4 workers who were to bruise the horns of the nations. Who is this? Each vision given to the prophet Zechariah is repeated twice in his book, under different images. The quote-unquote workers are the same horsemen that Zechariah had already seen before. It's interesting that the first chapter, Zechariah first sees 4 horsemen on horses, then 4 apparently dismounted people and workers. They came to cut off the horns of the nations, and they know how to do it, and I will remind you. This they do with the permission of God. When they went to open, they broke the seals of the book of Revelation, writes about it, pandemic, famine, war, and chaos. These 4 winds, these 4 seals, men themselves blew and blew for a long time, but God kept them as behind the 7 seals. But he's also tired of holding it and in pretending that people, while still normal, generally have not gone crazy, that they know what they're doing. They haven't known for a long time what they're doing, and they don't want to know. But God will soon cut off the horns of the nations, for workers are already at work. They've started. For several days now, I've been thinking about my post about the 2 years ago, 4 horsemen, 4 workers shall break the horns of the nations. That's all for now. I'm also a worker. I have to run to chop wood while the weather's nice, and then I have to do a lot, as I'm sure you do too. I would say, since we study the prophet Zechariah, what happened then in those centuries, in those countries in which these trucks with the workers led, it's not for nothing that Zechariah is also accurate in dating the events, but there are very few people who I am deeply interested, as deeply interested as I am, and so we have already narrowed the audience to an extreme degree. It's already funny and sad. And I feel sorry for the people who are outside of our social circle. It seems to me that not only our articles and discussions go through, in general, everything seems to pass by them. All life passes. However, even without the prophet Zechariah's prophecies, unfortunately, we will find out what is happening and what will still happen in our days before our own very eyes in the coming months. But we Christians, believers, need not fear the galloping horses of the apocalypse. And yes, they are already beginning to emerge. They are galloping contrary to the intentions of the rulers of this world, to return the kingdom and the white king that is to us our Lord Jesus Christ. Zechariah will show us how this will be done. And this I've translated for you from a Greek article written by a Christian Orthodox theologian. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.